So the way that we approached this, after we had built the product, which we built out of ingredients that were clinically tested on their own, that had clear mechanisms of action that we understood, we then combined them into one amazing product, and we created this clinical kind of in partnership with another dermatologist. And so we created a study that was a 6-week-long study. And the reason we chose 6 weeks is because the ingredients we chose had data at 3 weeks and 6 weeks, a lot, mostly at 6 weeks, but we knew if we did a synergistic combination of ingredients that we should be able to see better results sooner. So we built ourselves in some earlier time points, a 3-week time point to kind of check in.
Nice.
And so it was with 45 subjects of diverse ethnicities, which was incredibly important to me, of both men and women, a spread of ages as well.
So, and what came out of that study, the results that came out were 11 different signs of aging that were positively impacted by the use of this product. About that, I mean, I know we talked about the ingredient itself. Let's back up to it a little bit, because that ingredient itself was studied quite heavily.
Exactly, which is why we chose it.
Yeah, and then we replicated some of those studies in the clinicals that you did. Help us understand a little bit about how it was studied, what came out of the study on the ingredient itself, and then maybe the clinical
what we saw.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first thing that attracted me to the cranberry biopeptides, which is this retinol alternative, was the fact that it did have a comparison study against retinol, cosmetic retinol, where it showed quicker benefits and without all of those side effects.
Wow.
And I saw that and I was like, I've never seen this before, this head-to-head comparison where an alternative has actually outperformed retinol. And that was amazing to me. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I then went back and dug in a little deeper, and you see the gene expression studies that they've done with this cranberry biopeptide to understand mechanism of action. So they've actually shown that it is activating all of these different pathways within the skin. I have to be careful what I'm saying because it's a cosmetic, but...
Can I just let me ask a question really quick? But the cranberry biopeptide, is it acting the same way, the same mechanism of action as retinol, or is it different?
It is having very similar mechanism of action. It is not a form of vitamin A. It's actually thousands of peptides within.
Yeah, and I realize I asked that question, and we need to be like, there are certain things that topicals can do and things that adjustables can do. So I'm trying to be sensitive to that. And I don't want to...
They do have very similar mechanisms of action as far as how they impact your structure of your skin. I have to be a little bit careful with that. But also the skin renewal that Dr. Zand was mentioning just a minute ago to improve that radiance. So yes, a very similar mechanism of action, but instead of being a derivative of vitamin A, it's actually a very diverse group of biopeptides, thousands of different types within this cranberry. And the other piece of the cranberry that makes it so interesting is the sourcing. It is actually an upcycled ingredient from the leftover solids from the cranberry juice industry. So they take the solids, they do a really kind of purified extraction of the biopeptides, but keep that diversity so you get all of those benefits and that mechanism of action that is similar to retinol.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump into the study a little bit.
Yeah.
Right?
What the participants experienced were, for firmness, at just 3 weeks, they saw a 14% improvement, and that increased to 31% after 6 weeks. Let's see, another one of my favorites, lines, like fine lines and wrinkles, 20% in 3 weeks. And then it gets all the way to 30.
A reduction of 20% in 3 weeks.
Correct.
And 32 in 6.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing with every single one of these attributes is that significant double-digit decrease in 3 weeks, and then continued significant decrease or improvement at 6 weeks.
And that was self-reported.
Self-reported,
20-30%.
correct.
So as a dermatologist, my interpretation of that is that's amazing.
Yes.
Right. And to go back to what you said, the just clinical, actually clinical is kind of as powerful as you can get.
Yeah.
Right. In vitro studies, you assume that they'll translate to human. Human studies, it's documented. It is doing it. I have to tell you that there's work that I do on patients, filler and laser, that I charge between $1,000 and $4,000 for, and I tell them you're going to get a 20 to 30% improvement in your fine lines from this.
Wow.
I was telling you these numbers were good.
So those numbers are very significant.
Yeah.
But like there are some lines that are just hard to treat with
Sure.
filler and laser,
Yeah.
particularly the ones that are the fine lines that kind of run from the cheeks to the eyes. They're actually better targeted with topicals. So
Really?
to have something like this that really works, how
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was some of the images that we saw from the clinical study were specifically on a lot of those lines, of those marionette lines
Yes.
that you can see. At 3 weeks, you could already see a difference in the depth of them. But at 6 weeks, with one participant, they were almost gone. And it was just, not only are the numbers significant, you can actually see it. And that's why I like the self-participant, like self-reporting data, because they're actually being able to notice the difference.
Yes.
Because you craft it the best way you can. You do all the research you can, but you never know how they will synergistically come together
Right.
until you actually see the results, because those proof are in the results. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, now I know we've nailed it.
Awesome.
So we'll do lift is another really significant one. That was 18% at 3 weeks and 26% at 6 weeks.
When we say lift, let's talk about what that actually means.
Yeah, so kind of, as Dr. Zan was mentioning, as you age, kind of collagen makes up that structure of your skin, and it's like the springs in a mattress, and as it ages, you lose that structure and it starts sagging. And so you just kind of get like a little bit of a sagging and a drooping to your skin. And so the lift is just kind of the opposite of that. It kind of gets more to how your face shape was a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
which can bring back some of that confidence that you have in the mirror, because it can be hard to see some of those changes in the mirror. Because aging is beautiful, but we just want to help complement that natural aging that you have, so that as you see those gradual changes, they're not drastic, first of all, and you still feel like yourself. And that sagging can really make someone not feel like themselves anymore.
Yes.
And so kind of softening that up and giving them back a little bit back of that face shape that they had when they were younger makes all of the difference
That
in the
original
world.
structure.
Yes. And so
Yeah.
we saw a lot of that in the photos in like contouring of the jawline, where you just would see that contour just sharpen over the 6 weeks in the study in multiple participants. And that was actually one that I've done a lot of clinicals on anti-aging, and I've never gotten good pictures of that before. And so I saw those and I was like, okay, this is working. This is definitely working through that lifting mechanism of action, which is unique.
And you're like, as you hear that,
Yeah.
what are you thinking?
So, I mean, I couldn't agree more that just getting before and afters to show a difference, even with in-depth cosmetic procedures, is hard. We're going for really subtle improvements. The fact that you were able to show that and document that with a topical, it's just outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give us another one.
Okay, we'll go on the radiance side. So radiance was 23% at 3 weeks, and then 38% at 6 weeks.
Radiance. What
Yes.
does that mean?
So for me, at about age 37 is when I saw that shift.
Yeah.
When I was younger, people would say that I looked like Snow White. I had this glow to my skin. And that shifted at about 37, where my skin had still the same color, but it looked almost like it had a gray cast over it,
Okay.
is the best way to describe it.
Some people will say like a dull.
A dullness, almost like it doesn't reflect the light. Like you see a lot of young women doing makeup with contouring, and the intention of that is to catch the light, right? With my goal for my patients is to not need makeup, is to have that radiance from within and from the outside without having to artificially apply something sparkly there. But that's really the goal, because when you have that health and the radiance, you literally, the angles of your face show that reflection of light. And it was for me at about 37 that it went away, and I couldn't quite understand it. It was a subtle shift.
Okay.
It's not like anything else was suddenly drooping or sagging, but it just didn't have that same glow and radiance.
Okay.
So products like this are really necessary to restore that.
And what we're really doing, it's removing that.
Yeah, it's
that-
renewal. It's
So
that
it's
renewal.
renewal.
Cellular renewal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because, and it's kind of our whole differentiation of activation. We're going to the source of what's causing this
Yes.
dullness instead of just like putting a Band-Aid solution to it. And so actually helping you have that radiance from within
Yes.
so that you don't need
And
makeup.
maybe even just to jump in here, so like there could be a product that just removes the top layer of skin and gives it a little bit of shine. This one is from the inside stimulating it. I'd rather have that way than like something abrasive or irritating on the skin to attempt to get there.
Because we typically, right, this is a guy speaking. I think we typically think like exfoliation to do that, right? Exfoliate to remove the dead skin cells.
Yes.
But it's interesting that you're saying that brightness is really coming from the inside out, as opposed to just
just from the outside. That's
from
correct.
The outside. 23 to 38%. Those were the numbers used, right? 23 at week 3, 38 at week 6.
% increase in radiance.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what does that, like, how does that resonate?
A 40% increase in radiance in 6 weeks? Like, that's really amazing. The amazing part to me is the without the irritation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I can dermabrade your skin. I can do a chemical peel and get you that brightness, but you're going to have a week of looking red. To get there without the redness, that's, I think, the really remarkable part. That's really hard to achieve.
So when we're saying smoothness, right, I fully understand fine lines and wrinkles. After the explanation of lift, I understand that and the
texture.
radiance. So when we say smoothness, what does that mean to you?
So this is another shift that happens for most people between about 35 and 40. Generally, if you don't have acne, the skin reads as smooth in our 20s. However, our follicular, the debris in our pore emptying slows down at about 35. So our pores start to look a little wider. And because there's kind of stuff in there, your skin actually, some people might use the word congested.
Okay.
For me, same time, about 37, I remember just being like, what is this? Why is my skin bumpy if I stretch it? And I couldn't understand what that was. And it was just the stuff in the pores. So having an ingredient that will help to have the turnover, the emptying of the pores, and to increase that smoothness is really great because I mean, it just feels great, right? Having smooth skin feels really good.
Yeah.
And to have a 40% increase in that, again, without redness is really remarkable.
Yeah.
As we were looking at photos, my favorite thing was looking at, once again, the wide variety of ethnicities and men and women and seeing the results on all these different skin types and different ages. Different benefits, but all visible. And so one of my favorite pictures was on a male participant with darker skin, and you could just see all of the lines around his eye just slowly start to diminish over the course of the 6 weeks. And it just made such a difference to just his vibrancy in his photo. And once again, it was a male participant, a different skin tone. I love that wide variety, just showing that it is a solution for everyone, besides being just formulated for all types of skin.
Yeah. Maybe, you know, when we're examining products or when we're looking at them and doing these studies, it's important to us to look at different ethnicities. But is that as a dermatologist, are there really differences from one ethnicity to another on their skin? And
Of course,
there are.
right? I mean, it's even if you just look at one ethnicity, there's so many differences in skin type within one skin type.
Yeah.
Then when you look at different skin types, the options become exponentially larger.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, people are thinking about if they have dry skin, do they have sensitive skin, oily skin, and those are across all different ethnicities. What I like particularly about this product is, if I understand it correctly, even people with sensitive skin can use this,
Very
right?
much so.
And that is a really sticky spot in the market because I essentially tell people with sensitive skin that they just can't use anything with the word anti-aging in it because it's just going to, I mean, patients use the word lizard skin, right? They come back and they're like, I was red and
I've
peeling.
heard that.
They're like, I was cracking in the corners. I cannot use retinol, right? So to have that option for sensitive skin types, I think is what really allows us to be broadly applicable to every ethnic skin type.
Yeah, I love that. Your first impression as you were introduced to the product and looked at some of the things that we were doing.
So the two things that jumped out to me were that it's a retinol alternative and that it has no downtime. Downtime means redness or irritation that's expected,
Yep.
that a patient knows that they have to push through, could be a week, could be a month.
Yep.
But generally speaking, we're busy. I mean, people are busy and everyone's on their cameras. They don't want to have a week of being red. So in the past, Am I allowed to mention other skincare lines from a few decades ago, right? Like something like Obagi, which was very popular 2 decades ago, and it worked. And everyone was just like, no, you're going to get the lizard skin. It's okay.
It's expected.
Right? It's
They set the
expected.
expectation.
Yeah, exactly. That's the downtime.
Yeah.
But no one liked it. I'll be honest with you. They hated
You just
it.
Who's
power.
got
You have
who's
to
got
power
time
through.
for that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and especially with being on so many Zoom calls and you're just constantly in front of a camera.
And I think that's a huge shift since 2020 that like people are more on Zoom. They're more aware of their face. I can't tell you how many more guys come into my practice since then because they're like on Zoom and they're like, what is this brown thing? What is this dull thing? That
They notice
never noticed
everything.
before. Yeah. One other thing I'd love to chime in with is the importance of studies. I don't know if the audience is really aware of this, but there's been a huge jump in skincare brands since 2020. Because lots of people are sitting at home going, what am I going to do now? Well, I'm looking at my skin. Why don't I make my own skincare line? And there was truly just like hundreds of skincare lines that emerged.
Online through social
Exactly.
influencers. Yep.
And the influencers, you know, God bless, they play a good role in disseminating good information some of the times, but some of the times they pose as experts. They're not doing studies. The products were not studied, and they're just touting an ingredient or it worked on me.
That's the point. I mean, I think that's the key is so often, right, their recommendation is based on their experience.
Exactly.
That's,
and that's
wonderful
one
for you.
person.
But that's your experience.
Exactly.
That may not translate to anyone else.
Exactly. I have 7,000 patients and I'm aware of what they're doing on their skin every day. And so when I hear, oh, I've used that skincare line and it caused this, noted. Don't recommend that one. Oh, I used this one and it made this difference. Noted. Keep that on my list. Right? I think it takes someone who's, I hate to say it, but truly an expert, right? Somebody who does this day in and day out. They talk to people and get the feedback. And that's what's different than an influencer who's like, I loved it. They sent it to me for free and now I'm getting paid to tell you it's cool. Right? And then going back to the studies, right? I think these last few years, there's been a drop in the number of studies because there's a face that's saying it's cool versus the study or a doctor saying it works. So I'm just so proud of you for doing the clinical study and in particular the Vizia study because you can't fudge those. Like a computer analyzes those.
Exactly.
You know, and so those are real. And I just want to say for the audience, pay attention to that stuff. This matters.
Yes.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.